Didn't see you there. Just a moment. Gotta just move these games out of the way. Hey, hello, I'm Garrett. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Go ahead and like, subscribe, and click the notification icon to know when new stuff is coming. Anyways, today let's talk about action economy in Shrimp or Walrus. Honestly, I gotta talk about both today. So, let's go. Here is my deathmatch miniatures game that it takes one model per player. So, this game is a very interesting game about action economy when you're playing a miniatures game on the tabletop, but you're using cards for your actions. And it's only three kinds of cards. You've got attack, move, and block. Red, yellow, and blue. Seems pretty straightforward. The thing is that you can chain cards of the same type together so that people can only respond to the one action, but you're doing more things with that one action. When I think about the action economy in Shrimp, the way it works is you're dealt 5 cards. But the thing is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? At random. But the thing is, every single card is an action because if I want, I could take, you know, all these red cards and I can actually do one action and then improve that action with +3 attack because each card I'm boosting it is the term in Shrimp. Each card time I'm boosting it, that increases the roll that I'm doing. It's increasing the roll by 1. So if I roll a 3 on the die, I'm actually going to be getting a 6 because it's +3. So I can do that and a move. There's a yellow card here. It's kind of blown out by the lights, but here we go. Okay, and a move. But if I'm doing all of this, that's 2 actions. Or I can move, and then I can attack, 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 and that's 4 rolls right there, right? So it's 5 actions in my hand. Or I can do one of these and save the rest. And then on someone else's turn, when they move into my line of sight, oh, hello, I see you. Whatcha? I'm gonna shoot you, right? So it's like there's this fun, exciting, you get to decide if you are using your actions on your turn, if you're saving them for your opponent's turn. And since it's multiplayer, it's kind of this gambling game of, are they gonna come into my line of sight? Where are they gonna pull? Are they looking at how many cards I have in hand and they realize they don't wanna go into where my model would be able to see their model? So there's all that fun. Let's talk about action economy and actions themselves. In my other game, when I say action economy, what I'm actually, maybe more accurately trying to describe is the ratio of the amount of times a player can do something versus their opponent in a given game. So if I'm bringing, again, 5 models versus 20, if every model in Walrus can do 2 basic actions or 1 long action, that means if all 5 of the models in the elite army do long actions on their turn, in a round, they've done 5 actions. The horde army just did 20. So they're at 25% capacity. That's a lot, right? That's a big shift. So what you'll want to do either is balance what kinds of actions certain models can do, or you'll want to balance how important certain actions are and how impactful certain models are at those actions. Elite versus Horde. These are playstyles. They're playstyles that are based on what the model number is, and usually what you'll see with the amount of models that you're bringing is someone will call a Horde army an army that has a lot of models. So it's a Horde, but those models are usually very weak and they die very quickly, or they are not always good at what they're doing. They're better in, on the flip side, on the far side of the scale of what is the army playstyles in most miniature war games, you have elites. And elites is the idea of, like it says on the tin, you have a very small, minimal amount of models, as small as you can go. In most skirmish games, that's somewhere between 3 to 5 models, but like you can push it. You can keep pushing it. Like in Trench Crusade, I try and run 3 models for the Assassin's Elite sub faction. But anyways, you're pushing it to the small amount, and usually each model is very important to that player because it does just as much, or it has just as much of an impact as that percentage, but for the other Horde person's army, right? So if an elite person has 5 models and someone over there playing Horde has 20. Well, every model is going to be 20% as effective, right? Every model of an elite is 20% of that other person, right? And that's a way you can think about when you're trading pieces or exchanging, or you're figuring out, well, is this a good engagement or not? Those are all important things to consider when you're designing a game, because actually when you're designing the game, one of the things I like to do is make sure that players feel encouraged to reach for both or more of those archetypes. So I want players to be able to go about that is I've got let's talk about a couple models from the Avowed faction of Walrus, the Acolytes and the Faithful. They're both what I would call grunts, as I'm conversationally calling it, but in the rules right now they're defined as groups, which means they don't level up, they don't improve or anything over time like your specials and your leaders do. They're just chaff that you put in either to hold objectives or to, support your boss, or that your boss can support them, something like that. But these basics, the Acolyte and the Faithful, one is better at running up and holding a point, and the other is better at shooting. So you're gonna also be limited in the amount of which you can take. So of Acolytes, you can only currently take 2 in your starting warband. That's because they move pretty good, which is great for early game, running forward, getting onto a point. They have more consistent movement, and they, can be promoted into being your boss. They have a fun special ability where the Avowed faction is you can promote this particular model. If you lose your leader, they get promoted into your new leader, and then they can level up. It's a piety system. But anyway, so this Acolyte, because it has the promotional opportunity and it has better speed and it's better on objectives, that's going to cost a little bit more, but it's leaning that model towards players who want to play games where they're running out onto an objective and holding that objective, which Walrus has objectives. It's an important part of the game, but we limit it to 2 so that way they're not spamming this, running as fast as they can, getting there, right, and then forgetting about the rest of the game, which is having to fight over those objectives. So that's where you bring in Faithful. Faithful, they've got 1 hit point, no defense, they've got 1 in their speed, but they come with boots. Boots are great. They stabilize your speed a little bit. They give you 2 additional inches, so you're rolling a d4 plus 2, so their speed's not as good as the Acolyte, who has 2 in their speed quality, which means a d6, so it's a d6 plus 2. But they also, just like the Acolyte, they don't have a ballistic skill, they don't have a combat skill, they don't have a magic skill, and their interaction is just 1. Like, they're not that great, but they're a slow-moving shooting platform. That is the goal, and you can bring a ton of them because they're really cheap. So the whole point of the Faithful is they're just this throng that you're willing to lose. They're the, like Lord Farquaad and Shrek is saying, some of you may die, but it's the risk I'm willing to take. The guiding principles of Walrus are, it's a beefy boy. Like, the fun of this game is it is a high crunch, right? And so crunch, I define crunch in gaming as the complexity to resolve a mechanic. So the way activations work is very simple, actually, and I want to start to maybe crank up the complexity a little bit. But right now, when you activate a model, so if I say that this friend here, if I activate this model, and they're going to go off on a little adventure now because it's their activation on my turn, they get 2 basic actions, or regular actions, however you want to call it. It's 2 actions. I'm calling them basics or regular interchangeably. And they can go do those things. Or they can do 1 long action. And then there's different kinds of actions, like move, attack, like we talked about 2 different types of attacks in the past couple videos. And you can also interact with your environment, so that friend could go move into a building and make an interaction check to see what's going on in that building and maybe find some loot or some victory points. One of the most important actions is movement, and that's why movement, it has so much crunch within it, because it's a very common action that people are probably going to be wanting to do, especially for the first 2 of the 3 rounds. Like, if you're playing Walrus and you need to hold a point, the first thing you have to do is get a model to that point, which means you have to move. So it becomes a question of, what's more important, spending both of my actions moving, or 1 action moving, 1 action attacking, 1 action doing an interaction? That's where the trade-off starts to come off. Because people think, oh, well, what is the economy and how do I do it? It's like, well, actually, games aren't supposed to be entirely balanced, because then everything is too fair and there isn't the opportunity for winning and losing at the core. And as well, usually you want to think of like a trinity when it comes to design. The classic trinity, rock, paper, scissors design is, people can call it trite or whatever, but it works for a reason. It does. So, or pigeonhole someone too far, in my opinion, because then it starts to curb the creativity, especially if your game has list building like Walrus does, and you want to let someone really find their own niche, their own play style in your game. And you also want to give them something new that when they come to your game, they don't get somewhere else. So if I say, hey, I'm going to make a faction that's just a bunch of undead zombies and it's a horde and it's just what it is, players are going to go, okay, great, why don't I just play Age of Sigmar or Warhammer or any other game where I can just have a bunch of cheap undead bodies on the board? It's like, well, fair, but let's give you some flavor. Let's give you some mechanics. Let's give you something that's interesting, so when the players are putting together their warband for Walrus, maybe they try and replicate their Necron Overlord list from 40k, but maybe they find something new and they get excited about vampires with their blood packs and fealty system, and they get really interested in bringing innocent victims in their army list so that they have to put these out on the battlefield, and they have to try and get them and drain their blood, right? Like before other people, so that they can level up their vampires. And like there's something there in the faction, even though you're bringing a lot of models, that adds a unique playstyle, adds a little flavor. So there's that of your warlord, and keep them safe. They're the ones that you have peek out around a corner at an bad situation that takes a risky shot, and if they go down, they go down. They're your last Hail Mary if you really need to try something. They're what you use first usually. So they're the cheap horde. And that's two different ways that you can balance a horde army using those different models. And so those are some things that I'm doing in that Avowed faction. Versus, at the end of the day, every model in Walrus is going to be able to do 2 actions or 1 long action. Thanks for watching.